When he came back, he wasn't the same anymore, He had built a pit. I'm not sure, but I think there were about 6 alligators. I've heard that he had killed one of his wives, I believe. But they claim that he fed the women to alligators, and I don't know. This is Elmendorf, a big city. Count chickens, dogs, and everything for our population. My ancestors came from Alsace-Lorraine, a town between France and Germany. They settled here in Lytle, about 40 miles from Elmendorf, and then they moved to Elmendorf, where my grandfather, I think more or less, was the one that kind of built Elmendorf, I guess. His name was Frank Ball. Frank. They had a lot of money, I understand, after they got set up in this cotton business. This was cotton country all in this area. And Elmendorf was a thriving city, I guess, at that time, which it wasn't incorporated. And then my uncle there, he was in World War I, and he volunteered to go in the military to serve his country like most of us did. When he came back, my dad tells me that he wasn't the same anymore, In the war and all this, it takes a toll on life, and it's hard to cope with it. You can, but some people it's worse than others. In that day and time, I don't know if they even had therapy for this, which nowadays it does, they do. And they can help you out a great deal. he opened up his little tavern. I guess the business, I guess he got that from his dad, you know, businessman. But he had, I guess, girls working there in the tavern, you know. People were looking for work, you know, and they wanted to make money, and he would send some of the fellas to the Greyhound bus station, you know, and he would tell them the way that you know that a person is from out of town is to watch them, and when they get off of the bus and they look all around, you know, they don't know where they're at. They're new in town. But if you get somebody that gets off the bus and they head down and they're going, they know where they're going. And if it's a woman, he needed waitresses, you know, and he would tell them to approach them and tell them that there's a little tavern out in the country here. Y'all want to work, you know, and this fellow will give you all a job, you know. And well, there's a little town out south of here. Years ago, uh, they used to call it the Gray Lakes because San Antonio River went pretty close to it. And when it would rain a lot, the water would recess back in there and accumulate, and that's what alligators like is still water. And that is where my papa tells me that the alligators came from. It's not but about 4 miles, 5 miles from here. And he said they went out and they would rope the alligator, you know, with a rope, because they'd stick the head up and they'd rope it, and then they'd tie the rope to a tree. And an alligator, the way I learned in my survival in the military, is that an alligator, when they catch their prey, they spin in the water to drown it. But they'll never eat it in the water. They'll drown it, and then they'll bring it out and eat it. And this way, when they would rope that alligator, he was in trouble and he'd start spinning. And he'd spin himself right up to the tree, you know, because the rope kept tightening up, you know, and then they'd put I guess some tape around his mouth and then pick him up and put him in the pickup and bring him to the tavern, you know, the zoo, I guess, I don't know. He had built a pit, you know, a cement pit, and I'm not sure, but I think there was about 6 alligators, and he built a great big fence around it where they couldn't get out. The alligators don't eat, but maybe once 15 days or once a month. And he he would get me by the hand. I was just a little fella, and we'd walk around the edge of the pond. People would bring a dog or a cat, stray dog or a cat or whatever, you know, and they'd entertain the people, I guess. Throw the dog in the pit, you know, which alligators are fond of everything, you know. I think they'll eat everything, you know. I don't know, but I guess when they're hungry, they get hungry when they're feeding, you know, and I guess they'll bite anything, even a person, you know. And they're all in the San Antonio River here, you know. But there's alligators in there, and they're probably big ones too. I've heard that that he had killed one of his wives, I believe. Took her to the coast, you know, and they were going on an outing, I guess, swimming at Port Aransas, and that this black guy was his chauffeur everywhere he went, I guess. And they went to the coast, and he had told the black guy to stay at the vehicle, and so they were sitting there on the beach, you know, and they swam, and then they sat there a while, and according to my dad, that's what this black guy told him, that he stood up, you know, and told her to stand up to look at the sunset. And then he shot her in the back of the head, I guess. So then he asked the black guy to come over and help him. They dug a hole. And on the beach, I guess, you know, as the water washes, it keeps bringing in sand and makes dunes and all that. And my dad tells me that they had to get I don't know how long afterwards, but they had to get some kind of a heavy machinery to get in there and start digging. And then, I think bodies, it was 15 feet under the sand. I had seen her a couple of times, you know, when I'd go over there, because she had one arm. They were coming from San Antonio, and I guess she was going to make a signal to turn, and this truck was meeting them and had a load of cedar posts that they build these fences around here with, and when she held her arm out like that, I guess the load was wide, you know, and hit her on the arm and knocked it off, you know. I don't know about this one woman he had married. Her name was Schatzi. They call her Schatzi, which means sweetheart in German. I don't know whether he had killed her also. They had said that they had all the evidence they needed to take him in, you know, and put him in jail or whatever, try him or whatever they were going to do. And his friend was named Klebenhagen. He was one of the sheriffs in this county at that time. They were good friends. They would go hunting together, you know, and there was another deputy with Klebenhagen, and so he approached my uncle and told him, I hate to do this, he said, but I've got orders to take you in, and they've got all the evidence they need on you, and whatever it was, you know. And he says, well, okay, I guess he realized it, you know. And he said, well, let me go in and in the tavern and get my money from the cash register, and close up, you know. So they went in, and my uncle, the cash register was up against the wall where my uncle was facing the wall, and they were behind him. So my uncle had his pistol in the cash register. He knew that if he shoot himself in the heart, he had a 45, that the bullet would go through him and probably hit his friend over on the other side. So he said what he did was turned around real quick, you know, and so the bullet would go into the wall, and he shot himself in the heart, and the bullet went in the wall, and well, he fell dead, you know. And Cleveland Hagan told my dad that he knew exactly that if he would have shot himself like that, that bullet would have went through him and would have killed them on the other side of the counter. Cleveland Hagan told him that it happened so quick he didn't even have a chance to even pull his revolver or anything, you know. He'd have been dead. And so I guess that's where it ended, you know, where he died. And you know, for feeding women and people to alligators, I don't really know. I don't think so, but I don't really know. You know, after he died, well, they gave him, my family ancestors gave him to the zoo, you know, and they had a alligator park where they had all of them there. And the Wheelers used to live here in Elmendorf. He had sisters and brothers, but him, I think he was a big husky guy. And when I understand that they sent him to prison, I think for a couple of years, because not that he did all this. Then when he got out, he opened up a little tavern of his own, you know, and then I don't know whatever happened to him. It was hard, you know, when I was growing up, because we would go somewhere and I'd introduce myself, or someone would introduce me to someone else, and oh, Ball, you Ball from Elmendorf, huh? You probably remember Joe Ball, you know. And I said, well, that happened a long time ago. And I said, one thing I want to correct right now. I said, I'm from Elmendorf, and I would rather you curse me out than to talk about my town or my uncle, to run him down, you know. I'd rather you cuss me out than to do that. Don't run my town down either, you know, because I love my little town. And they wouldn't say no more, you know, and that was it. But years back, I remember when I was a little fella, they used to have a magazine they called Life, and they had another one they called Post magazine, and then True Detective, you know, and all that stuff. And they would come out with an article in there about my uncle, you know, and it was a story, a bunch of, I'd say, lies, you know. I was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina with the Green Beret, and there was a fella in there with me that from New Jersey, and his mom knew I was his friend, and she sent him a comic book. It had the story of my uncle in it, and he said, I got this from my mom, and she said, this guy was from Texas and fed people to alligators and all this, and you probably don't know him, you know, but she said, being your name Ball, she said, she sent it to me, and he said, you didn't happen to know him? I said, well, that was my uncle. His eyes got that big. I said, that don't mean I'm mean, you know. It don't mean I'm bad. Like anything, you know, the story can come out, you know, and by the time it goes on, they keep adding and adding to it. That's the way. That's the way things go, you know. They blow things up, you know what I mean, and tend to say false stories, I guess. But I don't know. In my mind, I think the war was what did it. You know, ain't no need me making excuses or anything like that. You know, but this is what I hope it was. You know.